I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
He challenged the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to carry American leadership in aviation to new heights. 7 men were first to face these unknown limits, but each mission's fear ended in new hope and new heroes. Man walked on the moon in less than a decade, and the world cheered. The lunar samples opened Earth's history. The Spirit opened our hearts. America's space program was really the world's space program, sharing technologies, inviting teamwork, and exploring further into man's existence. Medicine, science, engineering, weather tracking, the gains America has made in space save lives throughout the world.
Alan Shepard is best remembered as the first man in space, one of America's original heroes, and one of the original 7 astronauts. The first Mercury flight was suborbital. He flew aboard Freedom 7 and splashed down in the Atlantic after 15 minutes of flight. Soon, Shepard was named Chief of the Astronaut Office at NASA. Later, he flew as commander of Apollo 14, the 3rd lunar landing mission. Rear Admiral Shepard walked on the moon and in space for over 9 hours throughout his missions. Among his many honors, he was appointed delegate to the 26th United Nations General Assembly by the President.
Hi, I'm Alan Shepard. In 1961, scientists didn't know if man could survive in space. There was no knowledge of how the body would react outside the Earth's atmosphere. Chimpanzees were the first to orbit the Earth, and when they returned safely, America prepared for their first manned mission, Freedom 7. This film is the story of America's inaugural space flights. First, many satellites and sensitive scientific equipment had been sent into space, gathering information which revolutionized weather tracking, radiation, and other studies. Next, it was time for man to follow, to get one step closer to outer space. Testing, testing, and more testing was the daily routine they put us 7 Mercury astronauts through. With no information on the effects of weightlessness, we had to be in peak physical condition to withstand the pressures of liftoff and re-entry. Crash landings were practiced over and over. Repeated blood sampling and physical analysis were required. Those early spaceships were far from the space shuttles of today, and training was much more physically intense in those early days. Watch with me as America makes its first manned flight, Freedom 7, with me on board.
The heavens have always presented a challenge to man. Many secrets remain locked in space, secrets that have puzzled men for centuries. The search for knowledge about space is underway. Hundreds of scientific rockets and satellites have been launched. As the information is collected from space, it is made available to people all over the world. Already, startling and practical advances in many scientific fields have resulted. Projects such as these, information was obtained from scientific instruments in the rockets and satellites. Now, man himself is to follow these mechanical devices. Cape Canaveral, Florida, May 5th, 1961. U.S. Mercury astronaut Alan B. Shepard enters his spacecraft. Very shortly, he will be on his way into space. As the hatch goes on, two big questions come to your mind. Is the vehicle ready? Are you ready? Before the flight, Shepard had this to say.
I think the one thing that strikes me as I look back on the training program is that I have really developed a feeling of confidence. A confidence in the people with whom I work, a confidence in the systems with which I am dealing and will have to deal in flight, and of course, a confidence in myself.
You're confident, but you're human, and you go over the program just one more time. A feeling of confidence. It began to grow from the day you and your 6 fellow astronauts were selected from hundreds of volunteers. Confidence in the people of Project Mercury, the spacecraft, and the launch vehicle, and confidence in yourself. You were involved in the design of the Mercury system almost from the beginning, contributed ideas and modifications. You worked with the engineers, came to know the components and systems like you know your own car. And you followed the tests, test after test after test, to make sure the design did what it was supposed to do. While research and development was underway, you went through almost 2 years of training. You flew mission after mission in a trainer just like the craft you're sitting in today. Became completely familiar with every control and instrument. An academic program informed you and the other pilots on astronautics, space mechanics, and spaceflight. Kept you briefed on all new developments in the project. Zero-gravity flights in aircraft acquainted you with the condition of weightlessness you would encounter in flight. You got in a lot of centrifuge time, too. Today's flight won't submit you to any G-forces you haven't experienced before. The program simulated every possible situation. You know you're ready to react almost automatically. You practice controlling the craft attitude by manual control of pitch, roll, and yaw jets. That will be part of your mission today, and you're confident that you can do it. You piled up plenty of experience into 3-dimensional rotation. You know that even if tumbling situations occur after separation, you can bring the craft under control with your manual control system. There were continuing flights in high-performance aircraft. They were important to you, too. You're an experienced test pilot. Flying is your business in any type of craft. You remember extensive training in escape and survival techniques. There is always the slight chance the spacecraft may land outside the pre-planned area. As you sit in the spacecraft, waiting for launch, you know your training has covered every conceivable eventuality, every emergency, no matter how unlikely. As Project Mercury got underway, production of Redstone launch vehicles began at the Marshall Space Flight Center. Careful, individual production of vehicles earmarked for Mercury from the day the first bolt came into the plant. The Redstone was available, and with modifications it would do the job. At the McDonnell Aircraft Company plant at St. Louis, just 3 months after project inception, prototype spacecraft production was begun. A few short months later, production spacecraft were being completed. Your trips to the production points were important. You became thoroughly familiar with the Mercury systems. The closer you got to the system, the more confident you became. You followed the flight test program closely. Components, then systems, then prototypes, then production craft. A pyramid of testing. A pyramid of tests that would lead to manned flight. You knew that data and know-how was being gathered to reduce the risk element. Flight, the recovery forces were exercised. Procedures were developed to locate the craft and retrieve it. It became obvious that the craft would not be in the water very long after landing. A chimpanzee named Ham and 2 monkeys successfully flown in the spacecraft indicated the feasibility of manned flight. Then, all this was behind, and you knew everything humanly possible had been done to minimize risk to you and to the other astronauts. It was time now for manned ballistic flight. Mercury Redstone 3. At Cape Canaveral, Launch Pad 5. Preparations for the MR3 flight began weeks before launch day. You went out and watched the Redstone slowly, carefully raised into place on the launch pad. You knew that you might be the pilot. For about 10 days prior to meeting with the spacecraft, the Redstone underwent exhaustive tests, inspections, and simulated launch operations. This vital part of the mission, the launch vehicle, must be as near perfect as man can make it before the spacecraft is installed. You and your fellow astronauts followed the test program closely. While the Redstone was being checked, the spacecraft underwent test procedures at Hangar S, several miles from the launch pad. Test the electrical systems, the mechanical systems, communications, instrumentation, the sequential system. Verify flight readiness. You participated in many of the tests and checkouts yourself. You had worked closely with the vehicle for many months. If possible, you got even closer to it during the days just before launch. You worked with the Mercury engineers and technicians as they prepared the craft. The feeling of confidence in the mission became even stronger. Your fellow astronauts worked with the same team effort that had prevailed over the 2 years of getting ready. You couldn't be everywhere at once, but they could cover for you. And as you sit in the spacecraft, you know everything is as ready as it can possibly be. They covered the control center, the blockhouse, the launch vehicle, the tracking stations. They kept a finger on the pulse of the operation. The spacecraft was checked out in a pressure chamber capable of 120,000 foot altitudes to test the environmental control system. And then you were added to the system. You made sure that your pressure suit and the life support system were working properly. You knew that you weren't just going for the ride. You would be required to gather information, make practical contributions, make sure you collected usable data. You remember the final days in Hangar S, the retro rocket package being installed, and you know the care, the attention to every detail that went into the final servicing. The escape tower with its solid propellant rocket, the system which will pull the spacecraft safely clear of the launch vehicle before a catastrophic failure, either on the pad before launch, during the launch, or while the vehicle is in powered flight. It's a reassuring thought as you go through your pre-launch countdown. When each spacecraft system has been thoroughly checked out, a complete simulated launch and flight operation was run to make certain all the systems work together, as well as individually. And then, the Mercury spacecraft was moved to the launch pad to be mated with its launch vehicle. At the pad, the spacecraft was raised to position on top of the vehicle. Now you knew that the final round of testing was at hand. This flight will provide added qualification for the spacecraft and its systems in space, and train a pilot for later Atlas-boosted orbital flights. After mating, the testing began to make certain the launch vehicle, spacecraft, and blockhouse worked together properly. The launch countdown was checked step by step, and the complete MR3 system was verified to confirm flight readiness. Complete flight missions from liftoff through landing, both for normal and for emergency cases, were flown electronically. The spacecraft was heavily instrumented to provide pertinent data during the flight. Throughout this period, all the elements of the mission made their preparations. Recovery forces, tracking stations, the Mercury Control Center rehearsed the mission again and again. You and your fellow astronauts rehearsed your parts, went through the procedures over and over. 3 days before launch, a go, no-go review board evaluated the flight readiness of all the mission elements: spacecraft, launch vehicle, pilots, tracking stations, recovery forces, everything. The decision? Go. The recovery forces were dispatched and on their way to their stations downrange. May 1st, 1961. Less than 2.5 years from Project Mercury initiation. Countdown for a manned flight was in progress. That's a day that you will never forget. MR3 followed a split countdown, about 4 hours the first day, a little over 6 hours the second day. This procedure helps reduce personnel fatigue. Hydrogen peroxide fueling. This is used in the spacecraft attitude control system. The first day's countdown was completed with this operation. Very early in the morning, May 2nd, the final countdown is underway. Liquid oxygen for the launch vehicle. Before this operation, a meeting had been held to review the weather situation. The weather was marginal, but the decision? Go. At the Mercury Control Center, every detail of the countdown and status of all other elements, such as the recovery forces and the tracking stations, was carefully monitored. The Mercury Operations Director manages the entire flight from the center. In the blockhouse, systems checks were completed in the spacecraft. Launch vehicle checks were also completed. The recovery forces were on station in a line along the flight path, ready to retrieve the craft even if there should be an undershoot or an overshoot. You remember the final physical at Hangar S, the feeling that now, at last, the time was almost at hand. And you remember the feeling of confidence that you had, confidence that all systems were ready, and that you were ready too. Before leaving the hangar for the launch pad, you had sensor leads attached to your body. These leads would provide telemeter data on your body functions and reactions during the flight. Mercury flights are designed to provide comprehensive information about man during space flight, information that can be used by people all over the world in their own research projects. And then it happened. You remember the let-down feeling you got when the squawk box gave the word. Test number 108, MR3, was scrubbed because of weather. A let-down feeling? Yes, but it was reassuring to know that the mission would not go unless everything was right. Then it was Friday, May 5th, 3 days later, and the countdown was proceeding again. You remember the feeling you had that this was the day. There'd be no scrub today. The mission would go. You remember the ride to the pad in the transport van. You had rehearsed the procedure before, taken the ride to the pad, and climbed into the spacecraft. But this time, you knew it was the real thing. Of confidence. As astronaut Shepard goes through the pre-launch countdown, he knows the system is as ready as human effort can make it. Doctors in the Mercury Control Center and the blockhouse monitor Shepard's physiological status during the countdown. Astronaut Gordon Cooper, assigned to the blockhouse during the launch operation, stays in direct voice contact with Shepard. As the gantry is pulled back, the emergency vehicle known as the cherry picker is raised into position. An armored car is located at the pad. It can operate in any terrain. At the viewing stands about 2 miles away, hundreds of press, radio, and television representatives stand by to witness the launch. A helicopter stands by to take a doctor anywhere he might be needed. Astronauts Carpenter and Schirra take off to make direct aerial observation of the early portion of your flight. An amphibious vehicle is standing by, ready to move out if necessary to make a close-in recovery. The recovery force helicopters are airborne. All elements of the mission have reported ready to the control center, and the launch is go.
Ready to resume the count? Roger, ready to resume the count. STE, I'm going to turn it over to Stoney, verify. Resume the count. Okay, Stoney, take it over. Roger. 5 seconds. 7, Stoney, how do you read? 7, loud and clear, Stoney. Roger, loud and clear, also. 1 minute and counting. Roger. Bearing command, 30 watt. Roger. Periscope has retracted. That's confirmed. Periscope retract. Main bus 24 volts, 26 amps. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, liftoff and the clock is started. Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear. This is Freedom 7. The fuel is go. 1.2 G. Cabin at 14 psi. Oxygen is go. Cabin pressure is holding at 5.5. Cabin holding at 5.5. Fuel is go. 2.5 G. Cabin 5.5. Oxygen is go. The main bus is 24. And the isolated battery is 29. Seven here. Fuel is go. 4G. 5.5 cabin. Oxygen go. All systems are go. Cut off. Tower jettison green. Okay, switching to manual pitch. Pitch is okay. Switching to manual yaw. Yaw is okay. Switching manual roll. Roll is okay. On the periscope, what a beautiful view. Cloud cover over Florida, 3 to 4/10 near the eastern coast. Obscures up through Hatteras. Okay, this is Freedom 7. And T build up. 3, 6, 9. Okay. 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 This is 7. Okay. $25,000 feet now. Roger. The drogue is green at 21. The periscope is out. The drogue is out. Okay, a drogue deploy. I've got 70%. Auto, 90% manual. Oxygen is still okay. Turn green. Main chute is reefed. Main chute is green. Main chute is coming unreefed and it looks good. The main chute is good. Rate of descent is reading about 35 feet per second.
MR3 followed a normal ballistic arc, peaking at about 115-mile altitude. The spacecraft landed 300 miles downrange. The complete flight took 16 minutes and gave Alan Shepard about 5 minutes of weightlessness. Just 11 minutes after the spacecraft landed, Shepard and the craft were on the Lake Champlain. Complete and detailed information on the flight and on Alan Shepard was recorded from launch to recovery. Information to be made available to scientists and interested people the world over. Within minutes after the flight, Shepard received a well done from the President on behalf of the people of the United States. A well done accepted by Shepard as a representative of all the people in Project Mercury. Project Mercury, another step in man's search for knowledge. Freedom 7, another step toward man in space.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
He challenged the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to carry American leadership in aviation to new heights. 7 men were first to face these unknown limits, but each mission's fear ended in new hope and new heroes. Man walked on the moon in less than a decade, and the world cheered. The lunar samples opened Earth's history. The Spirit opened our hearts. America's space program was really the world's space program, sharing technologies, inviting teamwork, and exploring further into man's existence. Medicine, science, engineering, weather tracking, the gains America has made in space save lives throughout the world.
Astronaut Wally Schirra joined NASA as one of the original 7 astronauts. He's the only man ever to fly in all 3 Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. His 10 years as an astronaut were decorated with discoveries and distinguished service medals from NASA and the U.S. government. Wally Schirra embodies the proud history of America's space program, from the earliest spacesuits of Mercury missions to the technology freeing man to walk in outer space.
Hi, I'm Wally Schirra. Before 1958, Americans looked at space as the unknown. They wondered if man could even survive 1 second in the airless void. Scientists and engineers had to estimate every possible danger and prepare the spacecraft to endure. Little was known about the universe in 1959, but America wouldn't rest. We went looking beyond the boundaries, just as our forefathers had. This film is the story of Friendship 7, part of the Mercury program. It was the first orbital flight in America's history, marking a new beginning in the technological evolution of the entire world. 7 of us were chosen for the inaugural Mercury program, and John Glenn would pilot this mission. 2 suborbital flights preceded Glenn's, as well as some test rockets and chimpanzee-driven spacecraft. Medical experts could only narrow the risks by constant physical examinations and added precautions. No one knew what would happen up there. Spaceflight was brand new back then. It was all basically invented during this time. In fact, many of the technological advancements common today were derived from the needs of the NASA space programs. Watch and you'll see one of the early IBM computers and see how far we've come from the 1962 voyage of Friendship 7.
Space, airless, endless, alien to man. But man is going there. January 27, 1962. In a little while, if all goes well, astronaut John Glenn will be rocketed aloft, borne into space on the shoulders of a 20th century Atlas, number 109D. At the base of the giant rocket, and 85 feet above in the green room atop the gantry, engineers and technicians have been busy throughout the night, and for many days, and nights, and weeks, and months before. It began the day America decided to put a man into space, created Project Mercury to get him there, and safely back. Project Mercury, America's all-ahead, all-at-once initial step in manned space exploration. October 1958. Project Mercury went to work. Assembled a team of scientists, engineers, and technicians to manage America's manned spaceflight programs, to select and train the men who would be the free world's first space pilots, the 7 Mercury astronauts. American industry went to work too. In January 1959, McDonnell Aircraft was chosen to produce the Mercury spacecraft. To lift it into orbit, Project Mercury selected the Atlas rocket. The task of modifying Atlas from a military missile to a man-rated orbital launch vehicle was assigned to General Dynamics Astronautics. To the 4,000 Mercury contractors and subcontractors, to all America, human life is priceless. Nothing was left to chance. All systems, each tiny component of each subsystem, every switch, every valve, would have to function perfectly, would have to be the very best that American scientific and engineering know-how could produce before the Mercury Atlas could be man-rated, before it could carry an American astronaut safely into space. Safety, a Project Mercury byword from the beginning. The life of a human being would be at stake. A positive escape mechanism, an escape rocket. Systems to sustain life in space where there is no life. To provide oxygen where there is no oxygen. Pressure where there is no pressure. And backup systems in case of trouble. Power for the spacecraft with 7 miles of electrical circuits. Power for radio and for telemetry. Power for the in-flight control systems, both automatic and manual. Power to fire the reverse rockets that slow the spacecraft and bring it back from orbit. A shield against the blazing heat of re-entry friction. Astronaut, a new word for a new and demanding profession. Rigorous, intensive training in new and strange devices. High acceleration and re-entry G loads in the human centrifuge. Then, the opposite of G loads, no Gs at all, or weightlessness. Training and manual control of the spacecraft. Practice roll, pitch, and yaw maneuvers. Survival training. Every conceivable situation, both normal and emergency, was covered. Astronautics, a new science. There were classes for the astronauts in astronomy, meteorology, geophysics, rocketry, astrophysics, celestial navigation, and there was plenty of homework. There was other work, too. The astronauts participated as engineers in every aspect of the program. Each had a special area of responsibility in the development of Project Mercury. There were dozens of flight tests. Tests that confirmed the operation of spacecraft and booster systems in actual flight. And when there were difficulties, no one tried to hide them. Then, when the tests indicated that everything was ready, man was added. May 5, 1961. Astronaut Alan B. Shepard became the free world's first space pilot.
All right, liftoff and the
Clock had indeed started. Free man was on his way into space. First with Redstone-powered ballistic flights downrange. Shepard in Freedom 7. And on July 25, 1961, astronaut Virgil Gus Grissom in Liberty Bell 7. These Redstone flights paved the way for the Atlas-boosted orbital missions. November 29, 1961, Mercury Atlas flight test number 5. A chimpanzee named Enos. Was orbited, tracked, and recovered unharmed, confirming that the Mercury spacecraft could sustain life in orbit. Proof provided by telemeter data collected at Mercury tracking stations around the world. One hour after Enos was recovered, Project Mercury named astronaut John Glenn to pilot America's first manned orbital flight. Pre-launch preparations had already begun. Lengthy, detailed checkouts of the spacecraft systems. Tests of the electrical circuits. Tests and retests of the control system. The life support system. Pressure, oxygen, cooling. Outside, on launch pad number 14, the Atlas rocket, Atlas 109D, was raised into position. Launch time drew near. The spacecraft was gently placed atop the rocket. This would be a mission of science, a mission of peace. The name of the spacecraft, Friendship 7. Days and nights and weeks and months drew toward a climax. It was January 27, 1962, and the countdown for Mercury Atlas flight number 6, with John Glenn at the controls, was underway. But the weather was marginal. While the world watched and listened, Mercury's operation team made the difficult decision. The flight would not go today because of weather. "5 hours in the Mercury spacecraft, and it was still no go. But there'd be another day, and there was. February 20, 1962, a day free men will never forget. 2:45 a.m., the countdown was underway again. A feeling of go was in the air. "3 a.m., Mercury doctors agreed the astronaut was go. Medical sensors, tiny devices to constantly monitor John Glenn's physical condition, were carefully attached. 4:30 a.m. The count was T-minus 120 minutes and holding. John Glenn wriggled into his snug-fitting spacesuit. 5:01 a.m. The trip to the launch pad. A.m., the long elevator ride up to the 11th deck of the gantry, where Friendship 7 waited. A.m. The count was resumed. From nearby beaches, thousands of visitors watched. And from the press site, a mile and a half from the launch pad, hundreds of newsmen, radio and television representatives broadcasted every drama-packed moment to the people of America and to every nation on Earth. 7:52 a.m. A broken hatch bolt was repaired, and the astronaut was sealed inside the spacecraft, alone. But alone only physically. 8:20 a.m. The gantry was rolled back, leaving Mercury Atlas Flight Number 6 poised like an arrow, aimed at the heavens. Downrange, the ships and aircraft of the recovery forces were ready. .58 a.m. A hold was ordered while a broken valve in the liquid oxygen fueling system was repaired. In the Mercury Control Center, the minutes ticked away. 9:23 a.m. The count was picked up. Around the world, the Mercury Tracking Network reported condition green.
All Mercury stations at T-minus 5, side cone 8, and give status and green light on request. Med, go. ECS, go. Sequence, go. Electrical, go. ASCS, go. RCS, go. Stop, go. CM, go. CO, go. Flight, go. Tony, go.
And the final moments. T-minus 30 seconds and counting.
warning signal. Godspeed, John Glenn. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. Loud and clear. Roger, we're programming and roll okay. A little bumpy along about here. Roger, reading you loud and clear. Roger, coming into hike you a little bit. That little contrail went by the window or something there. Roger. Fuel 102, 101, oxygen 78 to 101, amps 24, still okay. We're smoothing out some now, getting out of the vibration area. Roger, you're through max Q, flight path is... Roger, feels good through max Q and smoothing out real fine. Cabin pressure coming down by 7, okay, flight very smooth now. Sky looking very dark outside. Cabin pressure is holding at 6-1, okay. Roger, cabin pressure holding at 6-1. Coming up on 2 minutes. And fuel is 102, 101, oxygen 78, 102. Haze are building to 6. Roger, reading you loud and clear. Flight path looks good. Pitch 25, stand by for... Roger, Pico. Back to 1 1/4, the tower fired. Could not see the tower go. I saw the smoke go by the window. Yeah, we confirm staging on PM. Roger. Still have about 1.5 Gs. Programming over. There the tower went right then. Have the tower in sight, way out. Oh, could see the tower go. Edison Tower is green. Roger. 1.5 Gs. Flight path looks good, steering is good. Roger, understand everything looks good. He's starting to build again a little bit. Roger. Bermuda 7, Bermuda has you. Roger, Bermuda, stand by. This is Friendship 7, fuel 103, 101, oxygen 78 to 100. All voltages above 25, amps 26. All Roger, reading you loud and clear, 7. Cape is go. We're standing by for you. Roger, Cape is go and I am go. Our capsule is in good shape. Seco. Posigrade's fired, okay. Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. Roger, turnaround has started. Roger, capsule turning around, and I could see the booster during turnaround just a couple of 100 yards behind me. It was beautiful. Roger, 7. You have a go. At least 7 orbits. Roger, understand go for at least 7 orbits.
Astronaut John Glenn is in orbit, 100 miles above the Atlantic. 17,545 miles an hour, 5 miles a second. 22 minutes after liftoff, lunchtime in space, over Kano, Nigeria. Across the emerging nations of Africa. Then Zanzibar. And out over the vast Indian Ocean into a sunset scene from space. 53 minutes after liftoff, Mouchet, Australia.
Roger, Friendship 7, Mouchet, Capcom, over.
Roger, how you doing, Gordo? We're doing real fine up here.
Any symptoms of vertigo or nausea at all, over?
Negative. No symptoms whatsoever. I feel fine, over.
So?
Just to my right, I can see a big pattern of lights, apparently right on the coast. I can see the outline of a town and a very bright light just to the south of it. On down.
Rockingham, you're saying there.
Roger. The lights show up very well, and thank everybody for turning them on, will you?
Sure will, John.
The world had turned its lights and its heart on. Across the dark Pacific and into the sunrise off the California coast.
And just as I looked back up out the window, I had literally thousands of small luminous particles swirling around the capsule and going away from me at maybe 3 to 5 miles per hour.
Across the United States in 8 minutes. White Sands, New Mexico, Corpus Christi, Texas, Eglin, Florida, Cape Canaveral. The flight continues. Orbit number 2, around the world in 88 minutes.
That is affirmative. I am go for the next orbit.
Roger, understand. At present time, ground concurs.
In Mercury control, a decision. Commit the spacecraft to a third orbit.
Good afternoon, 7. Reading you loud and clear. Hey, Roger, this is 1067. How's the tape in sight down there? It looks real fine from up here.
I can see the whole state of Florida just laid out like on a map. Beautiful. Even from this position out here, I can still see clear back to the Mississippi Delta.
Orbit number 3. Out in the Atlantic, the recovery forces are ready. The Atlantic. Columbus crossed it in 3 months. Lindbergh in 33 and a half hours. John Glenn in 14 minutes. For the third time, the Mercury Tracking Network receives complete data from the spacecraft. Data which is instantly transmitted to the Goddard Space Flight Center near Washington, fed into the computers for reduction and immediate retransmission to Mercury Control at Cape Canaveral. The entire process requires less than 30 seconds. At Cape Canaveral, the time is 1:43 p.m. At Mouchet, Australia, it's 1:43 a.m. But no one is asleep.
This is Friendship 7. In 45 more seconds, I'd like to have you send a message for me, please. Over. I want you to send a message to the director, or to the commandant, U.S. Marine Corps in Washington. Tell him I have my 4 hours required flight time in for the month, and request flight jet be established for me. Over.
For the third time, John Glenn sees the sun rise out of the trackless Pacific. Then it is time to fire the retro rockets that will slow the spacecraft and bring it back to Earth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Roger. Retros are firing.
Yeah, baby.
Are they ever? It feels like I'm going back toward Hawaii.
The Mercury team at Cape Canaveral reaches a crucial decision.
Texas, Capcom, Cape Flight. Go ahead, Cape Flight, go ahead. We have decided to re-enter with the pack on. He will have to crank in the periscope manually and override manually the 05G relay, which should be at a ground elapsed time of 044353. give him that message, please, Glenn. Roger, we can do. While you're doing that, we're not sure whether or not the landing bag has deployed. We see it's far closer to re-enter with the retro package on. We see no difficulty at this time in that proper re-entry. Over.
Roger. Understand.
As the spacecraft arcs down over the United States, the minutes seem like hours.
This is Friendship 7, a real fireball outside. Okay, Friendship 7, do you receive? Over. Okay, we're through the peak G now. 7, this is Cape. What's your general condition? You feeling pretty well? My condition is good, but that was a real fireball, boy. I had great chunks of that retro pack breaking off all the way through. 7, this is Cape. As you leave, you will be within 1 mile of the uprange destroyer. Recovery weather is very good. Over. Roger, understand. Friendship 7, going to drogue early. It's rocking forward. Drogue came out. Drogue is out. Roger, drogue came out at 30,000 in about a 90-degree yaw. Roger, is the drogue holding on? Roger, drogue looks good. Roger, re-entry checklist complete. Standing by for main at 10. Roger. Coming down on 10, snorkels are open. Roger, understand, snorkels open. Roger. Main chute is on green. Chute is out in reach condition at 10,800 feet in. Beautiful chute. Chute looks good. On O2 emergency, and the chute looks very good. The rate of descent has gone to about 4.2 feet per second. The chute looks very good. The Friendship 7 standing by for impact.
John Glenn had kept, as Columbus and Magellan, Sir Francis Drake and the Wright brothers kept before him, a rendezvous in time and history and the forward march of man. After 4 hours and 56 minutes in space, John Glenn and Friendship 7 returned to Earth. And 56 minutes in space as the representative of all the members of the Mercury team, all the people of America, and all men who treasure freedom everywhere. The voyage of Friendship 7 marks only the end of the beginning of free man's exploration of the vast, infinite ocean of space.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
He challenged the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to carry American leadership in aviation to new heights. 7 men were first to face these unknown limits, but each mission's fear ended in new hope and new heroes. Man walked on the moon in less than a decade, and the world cheered. The lunar samples opened Earth's history. The Spirit opened our hearts. America's space program was really the world's space program, sharing technologies, inviting teamwork, and exploring further into man's existence. Medicine, science, engineering, weather tracking, the gains America has made in space save lives throughout the world.
Astronaut Pete Conrad joined America's space program in 1962. He piloted the Gemini 5 flight, setting a new record of 190 hours and 56 minutes in orbit. Conrad flew on Gemini 11, docking in outer space and reaching a record 850 miles above the Earth. Conrad then commanded Apollo 12 and walked on the moon for over 7 hours. He flew the first manned Skylab mission, performing spacewalks to repair Skylab's damaged surface.
Hi, I'm Pete Conrad. The film you're about to see is an exciting overview of the Skylab missions. Actor E.G. Marshall hosts this look at what may be the house of the future. We would work comfortably inside Skylab for extended stays of up to 84 days. The small house-sized laboratory contained many experiments and was able to capture revolutionary photography of the Earth's land masses. This was of tremendous aid to cartographers and environmentalists throughout the world. We also set up a solar telescope aimed at the sun so astronomers could view all of its colors and changes without our atmosphere's filtration. Future plans for bigger and more advanced space stations will be certain with the overwhelming scientific success of Skylab. Who knows, maybe someday you'll be living in a 4-room space station with an Earth view.
Skylab Houston, everybody around here has looked at the bird and it looks real good.
Roger, roger.
And you're being awaited by the USS Ticonderoga. And we're waiting to see you back here in Houston, too.
All righty. You can relay to the Tycho. We've got their Fox Corpin and our hook is down.
Roger that.
This was Skylab on the final day of the first manned mission.
And if you guys
The crew had this last view as they made preparations for return to Earth.
give it to you here.
It had been a successful mission.
It's
The large majority of scientific objectives were accomplished.
10 miles.
But the bright orange sunshade, the single solar wing, presented a striking reminder of a mission that was something more than routine. A mission that gave new meaning to the term manned spaceflight.
T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. We have ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we have liftoff. The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up.
It was the afternoon of May 14, 1973, when the unmanned Skylab Saturn workshop was hurled aloft at Cape Kennedy, on the way to its assigned orbit 236 nautical miles in space. The cloud cover was heavy on launch day and prevented tracking cameras from seeing an event that occurred about 1 minute into the mission. At the point of maximum vibration, telemetry sensed premature deployment of the meteoroid shield, followed by a weak electrical signal from the workshop solar arrays. Clearly, there had been a problem, but the exact nature wasn't known until after orbital insertion. During the first revolution, Skylab temperatures began to rise rapidly, and pieces of the puzzle started to fall in place. NASA engineers surmised that the anomalies were most likely related. It was felt that the meteoroid shield had been completely lost at deployment, which accounted for the high heat levels. Also, that fragments of the meteoroid shield had jammed or otherwise hindered full deployment of the solar array panels. Failure of these panels, which were designed to furnish about half of Skylab's electrical power, meant that the total power burden would have to be borne by solar panels of the Apollo telescope mount. By early evening, workshop temperatures had risen above the level of safety. Launching of the crew the following day received an indefinite hold, pending satisfactory solutions. Flight support and engineering teams were immediately set in motion to find the answers. At stake was the future of the entire Skylab program. The most urgent need was to achieve a thermal-electrical balance. This meant maneuvering to an optimum flight attitude for solar requirements that were in direct conflict. Too much solar radiation would drive temperatures higher, increasing the chances of component damage and food spoilage. On the other hand, generation of electrical power to drive heat exchangers and food freezers was wholly dependent on exposure to the sun. While flight controllers struggled to achieve this delicate balance, Other teams had the major objective of designing a thermal shield that could be deployed on the workshop to make it habitable. NASA centers and private industry responded with a variety of shield concepts. The most promising designs were released for fabrication. Finally, they were subjected to functional testing. By the 5th day of the mission, the choice had been narrowed to a model called the Parasol. It had good functional reliability, and the crew would be able to deploy it from inside the workshop through a scientific airlock. Another shield, the twin-pole sunshade, would also be carried on the mission as a backup. Here in the Skylab underwater simulator at the Marshall Space Flight Center, crews practiced extravehicular installation of the sunshade in conditions approximating 0G. As for the solar wings, simulation methods were mostly inconclusive. Little was known about the extent of wing damage at this point, and the crew could only speculate on how best to make them deploy. At mission control, solar orientation of the spacecraft had begun to yield positive results. Temperatures, still too high for habitation, were stabilized, and electrical power was sufficient for operating vital systems and equipment. Though still precarious, the situation had been checked. There was reason to believe it would remain stable until the astronauts' launch, now scheduled for May 25th, 10 days behind the original schedule. On the day before launch, the Parasol team raced the clock to deliver the flight article on time. They were down to the last 30-minute extension as the Parasol, packed in the flight canister, was loaded for transfer to Cape Kennedy. In spite of the rigid schedule, hopes ran high that the Parasol would do the job. Attention now turned to the astronauts who would attempt to put it in place. In the early morning hours of May 25th, Skylab 2, with both thermal shields stowed aboard, was well along in the countdown. The crew, meanwhile, made ready to embark on their historic mission. This all-Navy crew consisted of Captain Charles P. Conrad, Skylab commander, a veteran of both the Gemini and Apollo programs. Commander Paul Weitz, who would be Skylab pilot for the mission, had been a member of the support crew of Apollo 12. And Commander Joseph Kerwin, scientist pilot, who would be the first American physician in space. The 10-day delay had been a giant cram course for all concerned, especially for the crew. And their job was only partially complete. The execution of all the planning effort was now solely in their hands. Following a smooth launch, Skylab 2 maneuvered to the proper flight path attitude for its initial downrange orbit. By mid-afternoon, the crew had overtaken the workshop.
TV picture beginning to come in now to the control center.
Skylab Houston, we're AOS at Guam for the next 10 minutes.
Callie, the Skylab. We got her in daylight at 1.5 miles, 29 feet per second.
Roger, Pete, copy.
They effected rendezvous and performed a fly-around to assess the damage. Most predictions were confirmed.
Okay, Houston, the meteoroid shield area is solid gold.
Roger, copy.
His brief description is his suspected solar wing 2, right?
Yeah,
2 is gone. Completely off the bird. Solar wing 1 is in fact partially deployed, and the reason that you've got different readings not symmetric between your three solar panels is there's a bulge of meteorite shield underneath it in the middle, and it looks to be holding it down.
Roger, copy.
Okay, Houston, it looks like the meteorite shield at the upper vent panel on the SAS wing has wrapped around it just slightly.
Where are we?
Now, my guess is that our easiest thing to do is just go to the end and try and deploy it.
Roger. Pete, from which side of the SAS is the meteoroid shield slightly wrapped around? Is it on the side of the main tunnel?
Before docking, the crew attempted to free the wing.
The other side, Dick.
Although the try was unsuccessful, the TV pictures seen here proved invaluable in devising the technique that ultimately worked. Following a night's sleep in the command module, the crew spent the morning of Saturday, the 26th, activating and checking systems in the multiple docking adapter and airlock module. Later, they were given a go to enter the workshop.
So we are progressing slow but sure, and everything so far is working.
By late afternoon, the canister was positioned in the scientific airlock, ready for parasol extension.
Okay, Pete, we had a little drop out there, some noise. Could you tell us what step you're on?
We're about to put rod delta on.
Roger, copy.
Okay, we had no trouble venting it down. It vented in about 4 minutes, and it held zero for 10 minutes without any outgassing. Door opened very smoothly, and so far the rod extension has gone very easily, and as I say, we're just taking a little heat break.
Some 4 hours after the operation began, the thermal parasol was deployed. It was then placed in position close to the workshop skin.
Well, we don't think so, Houston. We can see the ends of all the rods. It's completely free of anything. There's nothing hanging it up.
It took about 2 revolutions of Skylab before temperatures began to fall. Projections showed that if the present trend continued, the workshop would be below 100 degrees the following day. It wouldn't be the most comfortable environment, but after a discussion with the crew, the decision was made to proceed the next morning with the normal flight plan. The crew put in a long, trying day activating the workshop. Getting things organized and in the proper place was a chore in itself. However, they were discovering to their satisfaction that moving big pieces of gear presented no problem in the weightless environment. By noon, Monday the 28th, with the workshop completely activated, primary emphasis was on getting the biomedical experiment started. This was the first in a series of lower body negative pressure and vector cardiogram experiments. Paul White's the subject, Joe Kerwin the observer. There followed a workout on the bicycle ergometer to check metabolic effectiveness and to evaluate the bicycle as an exerciser for long-duration missions.
Ideally, the handlebars would be longer than they are now and would kind of sweep down around you so you could grab them in the right place.
Other medical experiments conducted over the next few days included blood samplings from each crew member to satisfy the 5 blood study experiments. Body mass measurement to determine each crewman's daily weight and to validate the use of this device for weighing in 0G. A rotating litter chair, a part of the human vestibular function experiment, tested for motion sickness, rotation perception, and ability to determine orientation. In addition to these and other medical experiments, science experiments were simultaneously being performed. Here, Pete Conrad operates the Apollo telescope mount control and display panel in preparation for the solar physics studies. In subsequent operations, data such as this active region of the sun was recorded by the telescope.
Weird sounds, but it's pretty collaborative.
Right? Got a tape motion light.
The Earth resources experiments also got underway after activation of the 6 remote sensing systems.
Mark, S-192, I got a ready light.
We just came out from over the clouds. How about that?
Auto sequence start on 90, and you ETC, Joe.
From a broad field of view provided by this large space platform, the systems began photographing selected portions of the Earth's surface in the visible and near-infrared spectral regions. Although the crew had earlier encountered a number of equipment problems, the result of excessive temperatures, the prospects now looked bright for a full 28-day mission. The temperature had stabilized in the mid-70s. The food was good, and so was morale. And up to now, the 4,700 watts of available power appeared to be adequate as long as high-load experiments were staggered. However, by the 5th day, some of the storage batteries had begun to perform in a degraded manner. The power shortage grew critical, and it became apparent that to carry out the mission, the jammed solar panel would have to be deployed. Meanwhile, at Marshall, in the underwater simulator, techniques were being developed based on TV coverage of the solar wing. Using only tools and equipment like those aboard Skylab, the backup crew developed a set of procedures they felt would do the job. On June 7th, astronauts Conrad and Kerwin made their exit to put the plan into operation.
Just take your time. Okay, Houston, we're out there. We have the debris in sight. There looks like enough room to get the cutter, and I'm trying to help Joe stabilize.
As the simulations had shown, access to the solar wing was the big problem, what with few handholds or foot restraints. It was solved by joining pole sections of the twin-pole sunshade, anchoring it by hooking a pair of cutters onto the strap that held the wing. Thus, a temporary handrail was fashioned that allowed Pete Conrad access to the solar wing, where he attached a tether. The cutters then severed the strap, and the tether was pulled taut to free the wing actuator. After the crew returned to Skylab, an attitude change placed the solar array system into the sun, where, after a period of warming the hydraulic dampers, the panel arrays fully deployed. Within hours, the electrical power surged to almost double the previous level. It meant that the power management scheme could be abandoned, and the original flight plan could be resumed. In the days that followed, the nagging problems that had plagued the astronauts from the start began to resolve. The mission began to sound much more routine, more like a normal working day. Experiments were coming off like clockwork, and a wealth of scientific data was being gathered. Experiments such as this one in materials processing. With more leisure, it was not uncommon for the men of Skylab to indulge themselves in the fluidity of movement in zero-G. The weightless condition also simplified sleep accommodations. Since there was really no up or down, the only requirement was a sleeping bag type of restraint. And as mentioned earlier, heavy objects were easily handled. It was the small pieces that sometimes got away. But even when objects were lost, They generally turned up sooner or later on the air conditioning screen, there to be reclaimed. On day 29, after performing final closeout of the orbital workshop, the crew donned spacesuits for the return leg of their mission.
Skylab Houston, we're in that hold CMG. You're go for undocking.
Okay, stand by.
Roger.
Okay, we're free. We got 0.4 of a foot per second, Houston.
Roger.
Bye-bye, Skylab.
After undocking, they remained on station briefly to obtain photographic coverage. Following deorbit, the command module, its heat shield trailing a fiery plume, re-entered the atmosphere. For the first time in about a month, the crew experienced the forces of gravity.
Ticonderoga standing by for sonic boom now.
Skylab Houston through a RA 1. How do you read?
Actually, we release you loud and clear, Houston. Everything's okay. We're out of 40,000.
Very good, Pete. You're in the groove.
Hello, recovery, Skylab. On the mains, everything's okay. And this is recovery. We have a visual below the overcast, about 100 at 050, 6,000 Ticonderoga. Recovery, splashdown, and it looks like stable 1. Ticonderoga, roger, out. Hello, recovery, Skylab, do you read? Recovery, read you loud and clear. How's it going? Okay, everybody's in super shape. That's great. Welcome back. Thank you.
Splashdown occurred some 700 miles off Southern California, near the recovery ship, the USS Ticonderoga. After retrieval and positioning on the flight deck, the command module hatch was opened. One by one, the crewmen stepped forth unassisted, seemingly undaunted by their return to normal gravity. They accommodated to normal activity within several hours. In San Diego, the first Skylab crewmen were received by a vocal and appreciative throng. They had reason to be proud. The large majority of scheduled experimental data was gathered, and all subsystem operational test objectives were achieved. All this in spite of the problems encountered from the start. Problems that in the final analysis required the presence of man to reason, to decide, to execute solutions as only he can.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
He challenged the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to carry American leadership in aviation to new heights. 7 men were first to face these unknown limits, but each mission's fear ended in new hope and new heroes. Man walked on the moon in less than a decade, and the world cheered. The lunar samples opened Earth's history. The Spirit opened our hearts. America's space program was really the world's space program, sharing technologies, inviting teamwork, and exploring further into man's existence. Medicine, science, engineering, weather tracking, the gains America has made in space save lives throughout the world.
Astronaut Rusty Schweickart joined NASA in 1963. He piloted Apollo 9, logging over 241 hours in space. Schweickart tested the life support packs used on the moon during a 46-minute spacewalk. He was backup commander of the first Skylab mission. Schweickart was then named Director of User Affairs at the NASA headquarters. He was responsible for transferring the discoveries in space into applicable uses for science and commerce.
Hello, I'm Rusty Schweikart, Apollo 9 astronaut. America's first space station, Skylab 1, launched unmanned, had been placed in orbit with substantial damage, its external solar shield having been ripped off during the launch. The crew of Skylab 2, the first manned mission to visit the station, spent a great deal of time repairing the space station and restoring it to a functioning laboratory. Skylab 3 was then sent up with an increased focus on scientific achievement. With the crew intently focused on this goal, it turned out to be exceptionally productive, some researchers calling it a scientific harvest. The film you're about to see is an in-depth look at living and working in America's first space station using actual film taken during the Skylab 3 mission. You'll be given a personal tour of the space station by the crew, visit their living and sleeping quarters, and the laboratory space in which they conducted a vast array of experiments for 59 days. By this time, in the U.S. space program, a great deal of preliminary scientific work had been done, and NASA knew that researchers could function as well in weightlessness as in ground laboratories. Therefore, the design of Skylab's scientific experiments was highly ambitious, and the experimental equipment was very sophisticated. You'll be given a personal introduction to equipment used to develop new materials in weightlessness. You'll see cameras and sensors designed to probe the Earth's natural resources. You'll see highly sophisticated solar telescopes and the phenomenal views they gave the astronauts of our sun. And you'll surely delight in the freedom of zero gravity as you join the crew in tumbling and playing in the open spaces of the station. Skylab 3's training and dedication paid off with an amazing amount of scientific data. Growing crystals of unprecedented size and purity, capturing the real-time development of solar flares and coronal explosions with a host of instruments, and obtaining never-before-seen images of the Earth's weather and physical resources, the mission was indeed a scientific harvest. Many of the results of this mission are shaping our lives today, both on the ground and in the design of more efficient space stations and space probes for the future. So join me as we eat, sleep, work, and play with the Skylab 3 crew aboard their combination house and laboratory in space.
Okay, Story, I'm hanging out here. I've done the work at the BC on the ATM, and I'm hanging out on the side here by this box you wanted me to look over.
See all the Great Lakes, see Detroit, see Windsor, Toledo, see the St. Lawrence River.
Okay, for the ATM drive room, there's a pretty bright spot over on the very west limb here. It probably actually reaches 7 or 3. And we're taking a little edge over the eye of the hurricane at 43 plus 15, just a little bit earlier than your prediction. And should have...
It's very, very easy to fly. It flies just like the simulator, and maybe a little bit easier.
In the months of August and September 1973, a second crew of astronauts lived and worked aboard the Skylab space station. During that 2-month span, these men generated a staggering amount of scientific data. Data that in some cases will take several years to analyze, and whose impact the scientific world has yet to fully comprehend. For the record, it was the second manned mission of Skylab. But owing to overwhelming success, it might well be called a scientific harvest. July 28, 1973. Skylab, with well over 1,000 Earth revolutions, begins its 75th day in orbit. Except for ground solar observations, its systems have been mostly silent for more than a month, having been powered down when its first tenants departed. Today, the slumbering space station will again be brought to life when the second crew arrives for an extended stay. Their journey will begin at Kennedy Space Center, Launch Complex 39, embarkation point for most of space history.
Transportation for the flight is the two-stage Saturn 1B, which is well along in the pre-dawn countdown.
Who's calling? Hydraulic pressure coming up on fin 2. All right, stand by.
In nearby launch control, the vigil is centered in firing room 3. Here, the staccato of digital readouts tells the launch team that all systems are go. The countdown is smooth, almost routine. For the crew, the lectures, the briefings, the simulations, almost 2 years of intensive training is behind them. Today, they begin the real thing. Navy Captain Alan Bean, senior member of the crew, is Skylab commander. In November 1969, as lunar module pilot of Apollo 12, he walked on the moon. The science astronaut and civilian member is Owen Garriott. He brings to this mission a well-rounded background in science and engineering. The pilot, Marine Corps Major Jack Lausma, who served on support crews for 3 Apollo missions. For the 3 of them, the longest space flight ever is about to unfold.
Get liftoff. We'll be looking for liftoff right at the T0 mark. We passed the 15-second mark in the count. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We have ignition sequence start. All ignitions are running. All engines running. We have a liftoff. And the second manned crew has cleared the tower.
By all accounts, there had never been a smoother launch sequence. Rendezvous occurred just off the U.S. Pacific coast, almost 8 hours following liftoff.
There's our home in the sky, Dick. Well, the old parasol, Dick, is really blowing in the breeze. Looks like about a 10 or 15 knot gale every time the thrusters fire, and just a very gentle fly around here.
Roger, we were watching that very thing there.
Al thinks he'll probably knock off the fly around at this point to avoid blowing that parasol away.
Skylab Houston, we've taken a look at both the CSM and the Swiss. They both look good. So go for docking. We're about a minute and a half from LOS.
Roger.
Okay, we're docked. That went real well.
An oxidizer leak in one of the quad thrusters was the only blemish on an otherwise perfect flight. The leak would mean a slight loss in attitude control on the return flight, but at this point, it appeared to be well within backup control capabilities. Leaving the detailed analysis to ground specialists, the crew wasted no time moving into their temporary home. Within an hour, they had begun restoring Skylab to a living, working environment. Activation consumed the better part of the first week because not everything went according to plan.
I closed the circuit breaker on that beauty and it popped open. And so then I turned the switch off and closed the circuit breaker, then turned the switch back on, and the circuit breaker popped open again. So something's wrong with MOSIP B secondary fan.
To give you a feel where we are at the moment, we're beginning to eat our meal right now. We've had to move extremely slowly to keep from causing any vestibular problems with ourselves. By that, I think both Owen and I have a little bit of stomach awareness, so we tend to be fairly careful how we move. And since we are moving rather slowly, then it's taken a little bit longer than we'd planned.
Because of built-in mission flexibility, the delay had little impact on overall scientific gain. The flight plan was adjusted as required while the crew continued to make headway. The solar astronomy instruments were, meanwhile, delivering data in the unmanned mode. Medical experiments got underway. And some of the corollary science and student experiments were initiated. For example, these Minchmog minnows, being set up for observation, appeared to lose orientation in zero-G.
They would usually float with their belly toward the wall, and then after doing that for a while, then they'd swim in outside loops again. So apparently they can't make up their mind which way is up and down either.
Yes, sir. Good observation.
Another passenger from Earth was Arabella the spider. This was a student experiment designed to find out the structure of the web she would spin in the weightless state. On mission day 6, a second quad thruster indicated failure. Even so, command module control was still adequate for the return flight. However, the uncertainty of additional failure prompted an urgent decision.
Hey, Al, this is Chris Kraft.
Go ahead, Chris.
As far as the RCS system is concerned, we really can't determine at this particular moment whether we have a generic problem or whether we have some two unique problems with these quads.
Now, just to be prudent, however, we have started the preparation of the vehicle at the Cape on a accelerated basis so that we would have a rescue vehicle available to us should that become necessary. Okay, now, I guess in concluding, I'd like to say that further that we're proceeding here with
as if we're going to have a nominal mission. And if you feel like you need any further discussion on this thing,
feel free to call us in any way which you want to.
John, you just said the right words. We've been hoping you'd say that all day, ever since we found out that that was a true problem that we had with our quad this morning. And we agree 100% with what you just announced.
Okay, so be it.
So as a precaution, rescue plans were set in motion. Whether they would be carried out completely depended on assessment of the thruster problem, a problem that could now be fully explored. As the mission entered the second week, the crew stepped up the medical protocol, somewhat slighted up to now because of more pressing needs.
We also have a way to measure our heart rate, and this reads out our heart rate in beats per minute as we're pedaling. Of course, the harder you pedal, why the harder your heart has to work, and the better it is for your cardiovascular heart system. While we're pedaling this bicycle during the medical experiment, our breath is analyzed in this metabolic analyzer so that our pulmonary system can be thoroughly evaluated during the period that we're up here. This is used in combination primarily with the lower body negative pressure experiment. The man slides in from the top here. He slides into his waist. Then we pump him down to semi-vacuum. That draws his blood from his head down into his legs. That's a good measure of how well his cardiovascular system is performing over long-term and space flight. Of course, that's one of the reasons we're here. The purpose of the rotating chair is to determine the response of the vestibular system to zero gravity. And we've been doing many experiments on this to see how the balance mechanism in the inner ear is affected by weightlessness.
Food log. DDR, 4 salt packs and 1 strawberry drink.
Other medical data was compiled from an accurate reporting of the daily food and fluid intake. Body waste and food residue were weighed daily. And the wastes were either dried or frozen for return to Earth for analysis. The weight of each crewman was also checked daily, not by conventional scales, but by a device that electronically counts time of oscillations of the subject to determine mass. And blood samples were taken. The samples were frozen and later returned for post-flight analysis.
Okay, you're up to start, Jack. Tape motion is working. Let her fly, Al. Stand by for auto cal at 3 seconds. Auto 1.
The Earth Resources Package was enabled. Its 6 remote sensing systems put into full operation.
Well, I guess we're crossing the northern border of the U.S. right about now. Over Montana. The border over Montana, coming down through North Dakota and then Minnesota. One of our major objectives in Skylab is to look at Earth and its resources. We want to look at its forestry and its agriculture, its freshwater resources, its weather, its pollution, and a number of other resources that are very important to us on the Earth. This is called our Earth Resources Experiment Package. It consists of about 6 experiments with which we look at the Earth, and we spend a lot of time taking data here. This particular instrument is a telescope, and we can see resolution down to a quarter of a mile square. For example, we can see a city block with this telescope.
Let's take a shot off the coast of Chicago there. Okay, there's a little bit of tracking in Lake Michigan just east of Chicago.
We have another battery of experiments also that are associated with Earth resources, and they are these cameras that take actual photographs in different wavelengths of light. And then these photographs are then returned to ground and processed and evaluated. And the purpose, of course, is to learn how to use our resources on Earth more efficiently and more effectively.
Handheld cameras were also unstowed, their lenses aimed at Earth through the wardroom window.
Okay, and we got that storm story. It's got a nice spiral effect, and it just doesn't look very strong yet.
This is Skylab Control at 11 hours 55 minutes Greenwich Mean Time on mission day 10. Today's entire crew schedule is devoted to the extravehicular activity.
This was the first of 3 scheduled EVAs. The amount of work to be performed would make it the longest.
I don't know. I've got to check now. Do I have any twist above me, Jack? Nope. Okay, now let me see about this.
Erecting a new sunshade over the workshop was their most difficult task. The parasol, deployed from inside by the first crew, had done an adequate job of thermal protection, but temperatures were still high in places, and too, the life of the parasol was questionable. The sunshade would even out workshop temperatures, and it would endure well beyond the final mission.
Everything's going in good up here. They're working at a slow, steady pace, and nobody's tired. So I have a feeling that the last half is going to go a little bit faster. We were the most concerned about this one because we didn't want to lose any parts.
Okay.
The EVA consumed about double the time allotted, but all tasks were successfully performed. The total time outside the workshop was 6.5 hours, a new record for Orbital EVA. Temperatures began to fall before the day ended. They eventually stabilized at around 75 degrees, providing the best environment in the workshop since it was launched.
The ground will enable you to see
The following day, the Apollo telescope mount was put into manned operation, allowing quick and accurate pointing of the telescope array at current solar phenomena.
Now, to begin with, when I switch to the two positions called H-alpha. These words stand for hydrogen alpha, and they are called hydrogen because the light that we see comes from light radiated by hydrogen atoms in the sun's atmosphere. Now, this light is in the visible wavelength range, and you can actually see these things, these pictures on the ground as well. They're about the only instruments that we have of that nature. And we use them here because we see much of the fine detail on the sun at these wavelengths radiated by the hydrogen atoms. For example, we can see sunspots, we can see network, we can see filaments, all of these things on the sun in great detail. Now, the next display that I'd like to discuss briefly is a white light coronagraph. Now, this coronagraph also records or images pictures in the visible part of the wavelength. But it has a very unique feature which makes it something that cannot be observed very often from the ground. And this is, it has some occulting discs out in front of the telescope, so that the center of the image, the disk of the sun, is blotted out, and all we see is the very faint light coming in from the solar corona. Now, those of us on the ground can only see this at those very infrequent intervals when we have a total eclipse of the sun. Now up here, we're essentially looking at a total solar eclipse all day long. And we monitor the changes that occur in the corona, and once we tie all of our three missions together here in Skylab, we will have monitored the changes that occur in the solar corona over a period of over 5 months. And some of the changes are dramatic indeed. We have, as a matter of fact, recorded some very large transients that occurred in the solar corona. A large bubble of gas was blown outward through the solar corona. It stretched the magnetic field lines out like rubber bands and finally burst the rubber bands, and the gas continued far on out into the corona and eventually reached the environment of the Earth. Now, when these gas bubbles do reach the environment of the Earth, they cause some very interesting things which we can see, or you can see, on the ground. Aurora are one of the most fascinating things that are produced by the arrival of these clouds of gas and magnetic field disturbances. And when they arrive and perturb the Earth's magnetic field, in some way not fully understood, the auroras are produced.
Dr. Garriott went on to explain instruments that record in the extreme ultraviolet and instruments that provide data in the X-ray wavelengths. And he talked about that interesting phenomena we call solar flares.
Flares, for example, are some of the most outstanding transients. We've had the good fortune to see several of these since we've been up here in the last 4 weeks. And when these events occur, we very quickly go over and train all of our instruments on those flares and begin taking photographs as rapidly as possible in as many wavelengths as is possible. And we hope to better understand what produces these flares, what is the size of the flare, and perhaps better understand the mechanism by which these things are produced.
Skylab telescopes also reached out beyond our sun to record the ultraviolet spectra of distant star fields. Early type stars, too faint to be seen with the naked eye, were photographed, as were the abundance of young, hot stars in the Milky Way. In conjunction with this experiment were 2 student investigations designed to obtain ultraviolet spectral data from known pulsars and quasars. In related stellar studies, other instruments were activated to provide a panoramic view and measure ultraviolet brightness of a large number of stars.
Down here trying to get squared away to get some pictures.
In evaluating the requirements for future manned space flights, high priority is placed on a machine that will allow an astronaut to move freely in space. Such a machine is the Astronaut Maneuvering Unit, here being flight tested by Alan Bean.
Now he's going to fly around those ring lockers.
Maneuvering unit is quite reliable, quite easy to fly. As you know, I believe this is me flying it here, and then Jack flew it some, and we wanted to ask Owen to fly it since he had gone through none of the training, and he got in there and flew it just as well as either of us with the minimum of training, and just the on-the-job training up there. It kind of gave you a feeling that this sort of a maneuvering unit could be built where pre-flight training would be minimized and yet you could still do the job you wanted to do outside.
A foot-controlled maneuvering unit was later tested, but in its present configuration, it got rather low marks in performance.
Free maneuver.
The future design that will shuttle astronauts between spacecraft or from spacecraft to satellite will likely be similar to the hand-operated model. In web building, Arabella was getting a handle on zero-G.
Spider appeared to adapt relatively well to zero-G. As I recall, the first day or two, she was a little reluctant to do much of anything, but she then started spinning small webs in the corners and then attached a larger size web, similar to one that she's accustomed to spinning on the ground, to those smaller webs which were attached to the corners. And so she was able to improvise quite readily in the weightlessness of space.
The adult minnows, meanwhile, were still confused about which way was up or down. But strangely enough, their children, recently hatched aboard Skylab, came into the world without ever having to adapt to zero-G.
Okay, this is the CDR. We finished doing step 3. We're going to go back and do steps 1, 2, and then 1 again.
Will body motions of crewmen affect attitude and control of a space vehicle? This question was put to the test in a series of crew vehicle disturbance runs.
Okay, they just jumped off the wall, and you can see the excursion rather clearly on the ATM monitor. It was probably an arc minute or so. They're jumping back, and you can see the excursion up and down on the monitor quite clearly.
A force measuring system, which senses loads applied to the workshop, is matched with concurrent control system data to find the answers. The tests will clear up many uncertainties about crew motion effects and will influence the design of spacecraft of tomorrow.
Okay. Now let me reach over here and I'll make it parallel to the panel with a little bump on it.
The subject of attitude and control became a more immediate concern during the second scheduled EVA. Skylab's rate gyro system, which instructs the computer as to the amount of attitude drift, had a faulty gyro package. Jack Lausma would install a new one.
Okay, Bruce, I'm down here looking at WCIE with all these connectors, and I just got the victim loose. And in a few minutes, the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we're going to have this hooked up.
The package was installed and placed online. Within minutes, the results were in.
And for the CDR and telemetry, the six-pack is looking good. The gyros are matching each other. Good news, and now I'm going to power up the CMG again.
The EVA lasted 4.5 hours. All tasks were successfully performed. Early next day, the crew set a record for the longest manned spaceflight. They had already traveled 11.5 million miles. What's more, productivity was at an all-time high. They were now running well ahead of schedule and even requesting jobs to increase the daily workload. One such task was the behavior of bubbles in zero-G.
And we will try to cause some perturbations to it again. Now you see the oscillations are much less damped, and it exhibits almost all of the pre-modes of oscillation that you would expect for more or less a ball of liquid like that. We will set up those oscillations again by just blowing an air jet on the bubble. Okay, there it's freely floating.
There were also demonstrations of angular momentum, magnetic effects, a Wilberforce pendulum. There was even an attempt to find out about the aerodynamics of a paper airplane without gravity.
Another set of experiments that we have on Skylab is to explore the industrial uses of space. Here before you have an electron beam welding gun. Now, it doesn't look like a welding gun that we have on Earth, but it's operated by high intensity or high energy beam of electrons, which will strike metallic material in this chamber, which can be evacuated, and it's capable of melting the metal and of welding two pieces together. Additionally, with this chamber and the electron beam gun, we can produce perfect spheres or ball bearings. So grow crystals in here. As you know, perhaps much of metallurgy and crystal growth and the formation of metals is very dependent upon gravity. We believe that we can grow perfect crystals and perfect metal without the presence of gravity, and we're examining that particular phenomenon here at Skylab.
While most of the time was devoted to experimentation, a part of the astronauts' day was spent on the more mundane aspects of living. There were meals to prepare, cleaning, taking out the garbage, equipment repairs, personal hygiene, and always the exercise. Although a few hours away from the routine was rare, it usually found expression in the novelty of zero-G. By mid-September, it became apparent that the rescue mission would not be flown. Analysis had shown that command module alternate control modes were more than adequate for deorbit, and the condition had remained stable. In addition, contingency plans were defined for the defective quad thrusters in the unlikely event they would be required. It looked like a nominal mission all the way. Skylab cameras, meanwhile, maintained a steady flow of pictorial data, such as Earth's horizon air glow. These photos will tell scientists about the behavior of ozone and its importance to the thermal balance of the atmosphere. For the science of meteorology, strong weather systems were closely documented, as were these very striking wind convection patterns. Volcanoes? They were photographed around the world to perhaps form a basis for predicting volcanic activity. The Alps, the Straits of Magellan, Italy, Gibraltar, Washington, Baltimore, the Grand Canyon, Cape Cod, the drought area of Africa. From handheld and Earth resources cameras, our planet was photographically documented as never before.
Just today we completed our last pass, as a matter of fact, and there are going to be literally thousands and thousands of films which will be developed and used to evaluate these techniques for the study of our crops, for the study of water resources, mineral deposits, and that sort of thing. So in the area of Earth resources, I think we do have fairly immediate benefits for all of our country and other countries as well.
Okay, Skylab, and we just went around the motor here, and you guys are go for undocking.
September 25th, mission day 60. And for this mission, time had about expired.
Houston, AOS Caernarvon, 7 minutes.
We undocked on time. We're moving away. We indicated about 0.3 of a foot per second separation velocity. We're getting ready to run the RCS check.
Very good, Al, and we'll be watching.
Seems like we're leaving home, Bob.
Recovery would be off Southern California by the USS New Orleans.
Skylab, the bird looks super to us. Your go for deorbit and entry.
Good news. We're ready to go ourselves. We'll see you on the ground, I guess. Is this our last comp?
After 2 months and some 24 million miles, the scientific journey had ended. They were home, back in Earth's gravitational fold.
Subjective feeling, I think, was one where your legs feel strong enough and it doesn't feel like it's too heavy to move your body around. But I think your lateral balance is sort of funny. We didn't seem to have much problem with wanting to pitch forward or backwards. It was mostly the sideways correction.
It would take a couple of days for the crew to regain their steadiness, a normal part of the readaptive process. Many hours of medical tests would follow in which all data would be within normal limits. Long-term medical effects would take several weeks to analyze. But for now, they felt well. Their spirits were high, and they looked forward to home and family.
I didn't know we had so many friends. I'm glad to see you all here today.
Reunion took place at Houston's Ellington Air Force Base amid welcome home ceremonies. Just as they will for many months to come, the crew attempted to share some of their experiences. Experiences out of which a store of knowledge was gleaned that will shed new light on our troubled planet. And experiences that have served as a proving ground for the next Skylab mission and for our future course in space.
Man is in space right now. He's in space to stay. He will always be in space in the future. So the business we're in at the moment right now is trying to develop the abilities to carry out these explorations and advancements that are sure to come. It may not be 5 years from now, or 10, or 15, but if we could all return to the Earth 1,000 years from now, we'd find that there are many people here, but there are people that have gone from this Earth to the other planets of the solar system, and perhaps even the other stars. We've embarked upon a most fantastic journey, and it will never end.